was that about? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, and I realized that because I was trying to lead, right? Everybody follow me. I was missing all of this input from people who were way brighter than me. And what I needed to do was like lead less, like maybe lead more from kind of the back of the room and just make sure that the right people were in the room and the conversations were happening and that they were generally pointed in the right direction. But I needed to be listening more. I needed to be like in that moment, if I could go back and do it again, right? I'd be like pulling more information out of him. I'd be like, oh, tell me more about that, right? Even though I think I know what he's talking about and I think it's already taken care of, like trying to be more curious, right? And pull that stuff out. Because it turns out he had a much deeper grasp of the whole system in his head than probably anybody else in the room. But because I was the loud one and I was the more senior one, right? He shut down.
Let me ask a question from Kendrick's perspective. If you're a
Yeah.
Kendrick out there, what could he have done better, if anything, in that circumstance, right? Because you don't want to outshine your boss or be disrespectful or push back too hard. What is there something he could have done to get through?
You know, so I'd like to think that pushing a little harder and sharing more of his thought process, maybe, right, if he was going to try to play it safe, catching me later and being like, "Hey, I know you've probably got it all figured out, but I'm worried about this and then this and then this and then this." So I think that those sorts of things. But all of that said, I think that the fact that there was this power dynamic,
Yeah.
right? I was more senior. I had the higher title. I was the one at the front of the room, like leading everything. Um, Made it much more likely that we were each going to behave the way that we did. And I think that part of actually being good in a position of leadership or power starts with being aware of that power dynamic and, finding ways to try to compensate for it, right? Because usually the people who have the power are not fully aware
Uh,
of the magnitude of the power dynamic at play, right? I can't tell you how many managers I have coached who tell me, oh, I mean, yeah, technically I'm their manager, but we're all just peers around here and I have an open door policy and people can talk to me about anything and they know that.
yeah.
And like, you know, I'm there doing some coaching with the team and people are telling me things that they're definitely not telling that manager. And so then part of my job as a coach is to say, well, actually, that's not how it is, right? People actually do watch what they say around you. And that's hard for people to hear and hard for folks to adjust to, but I think it's really important.
I see that a lot as I'm coaching managers as well. The key part there, the takeaway is awareness, doing a regular inspection of how you're showing up, how people respond around you, how you're leading the team in a real way, asking for feedback on how it is in an open way that people feel comfortable doing that. But it all starts with that awareness and that self-awareness that you have to have, even as if you're not a manager. As an IC, having that self-awareness is so critical to making sure you can grow. So that's a really good call out.
Well,
Okay, let's move to the next segment. We're going to keep going deeper here, but we're going to call this the power up segment and
all right.
talk about skill building and career moves. And so I mentioned this earlier. Agile is often seen as the sticky notes in your stand up meetings. And I always heard the buzzword Scrum and all the other stuff that I had no idea and I was intimidated by. What did I and what do people get wrong about Agile today?
I think the thing that I see most commonly is people learn some practices, right? We should do this, right? We should have a meeting where we all stand up and have sticky notes, but they don't understand the underlying reason, the underlying why behind the practice. And so if you end up just doing the practice, but you don't know why, it becomes, well, first off, it doesn't have a lot of value. And it becomes, oh, I don't know, like we're just performing this thing and it feels like overhead and all of that. My very common example of this is the daily scrum or the daily stand-up meeting. And for a long time, the way this was taught to people was, oh, you get the team together and everybody answers three questions, right? What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And what impediments do I see? The thing is, if you do that, right? Everyone shows up and goes, oh, yesterday I worked on this and today I'm going to work on that. And yeah, no problems today. I mean, that's a status meeting, right? We're all going to walk away from that going, why did we do that? How did that make things better, right? Can I please have that 15 minutes back? What people weren't taught, sadly, was like, what's the purpose of a daily scrum, right? And the purpose is for a team, right? A group of people who are trying to work interdependently towards common goals to every day inspect and adapt their plan for the work so that every day they can make the most effective plan for that day, right? Like as we're doing the work, we're discovering things about the work. And so if we come together and say, hey, of all the work we know about, what do we think is the most important work to focus on today? And how are we all going to work together to do that work? Right. That's the purpose of it, is to come away with a plan for the day that the whole team is really confident is addressing the most important stuff. And that performative way, the 3 questions, doesn't really do that. Right. And I've seen teams that do a variation on that where they answer the 3 questions. So it's like, okay, we know what got done yesterday. Everybody shares what they think they should do today. But then afterwards, we all step back and go, okay, well, let's look at all the pieces of work that nobody signed up for. Are any of those more important than the ones that people did sign up for? And if so, let's kind of readjust. That can work. Some people, like my good friend and often colleague, Season, will go so far as to say we just have to abandon the 3 questions entirely. And, I would not argue with that, right? Because I think people got so wrapped up in we're supposed to do this as opposed to why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the purpose? Right. And the purpose is, as a team, we inspect and adapt the work we're doing so that every day we make sure we're doing the most important work. So yeah, I mean, that's a classic example. And I think in the agile space, there is just over and over lots of examples of that, of people who learn a practice, right? Do step 1, step 2, step 3. But if they don't know why, they end up doing this stuff, but it doesn't really have a lot of benefit because they don't.
That's a really good call. And I led a team, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago now, and we would have the daily 15-minute stand up, and we would do the 3 questions, and then we would all go our separate ways. And we never really did get to your point of what are we actually accomplishing in this meeting? And it was like, are we doing this for connection? It felt performative after the second week. It felt like a waste of time. I went from 5 days a week to 3 days a week because it felt like it was just this repetitive nonsense. But I actually feel embarrassed because I never once asked the question, what am I really trying to accomplish by this? It did feel cool as a team. We all turned around because we were in a pod together and we had our morning kumbaya. Yeah, I should have asked what are we really trying to accomplish? And so that's a really good call for anybody out there that's doing daily stand-ups. There is an actual point to them, but make sure you're asking the why and what are you actually getting the impact from that. So very good call there. Let's go back to you being an engineering leader. Is there a specific, once again, I'm trying to get specific so people can actually
Yeah.
put themselves in your shoes or figure this out in a little bit more practical way. Was there a time that using agile principles saved a project or saved a team or brought something back from the ashes?